I would like to introduce Professor Janet Watson in her talk. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new talk, this time entitled Beauty in Diversity, Language and Nature in Southern Arabia. It is always difficult to introduce great people like Janet Watson, the outstanding scholar and researcher, within few minutes. One wonders what to say and what to leave about her. She is the leadership chair of language at Leeds, Faculty of Arts, School of Languages, Cultures and Societies. Holding this position at one of the top 100 universities of the world tells you much about who our honorable guest is. Her basic area of interest is documentation of the modern South Arabian languages of Oman and Yemen, and their cultural and historical traditions. Her interest in Arabic dialects of Yemen and Oman involves their phonology, morphology, phonetics, in addition to the relationship between language and nature. After studying Arabic and Islamic studies at the University of Exeter, moved to South London to study linguistics and then completed a PhD in the phonology and morphology of Yemeni Arabic dialects. She held academic posts at the universities of Edinburgh, Durham, and Salford, and also held visiting posts at the universities of Heidelberg and Oslo. Together with the Prof. John Lovett, she founded the Center for Endangered Languages, Cultures, and Ecosystems in January 2019. She is on the editorial board committee of the Seminar of Arabian Studies, the Journal of Semitic Studies, and others. Professor Watson was elected a fellow of the British Academy, Section H3, in 2013 and co-opted to Section H4 in 2016. Her publications are diverse and varied on a very wide platform of linguistic and cultural knowledge. I cannot list them now because of time limits, but I refer you to her academic profile page. She supervised a host of PhD students in several areas of her interest. I don't know where she gets time to do that all. I was lucky enough to meet Prof. Watson in person when I was doing my PhD at the University of Leeds. One day, my supervisor, Jeremy Mundy, told me that a scholar is going to join the school with interest in Arabic. Busy with my dissertation findings, I soon forgot about that, but the day came soon. I held an appointment with my second supervisor, James Dickens, the well-known scholar, and the then chairman of Middle East and Arabic Studies. We were sitting in his office discussing my findings when we heard a faint knock at the door. In a formal and authoritative tone, Prof. James Dickens reacted, "Come in." After that, the scene has radically changed. A trendy, slim, fine-looking lady in black opened the door and swiftly moved in, greeted me with a lovely smile, and then whispered some words in James's ear. James's rosy face flushed red, and he even started to mumble. At that point, I realized that we were visited by a VIP. She apologized for the interruption, turned back with her never-fainting smile, and left. After a couple of minutes or so, James restored his usual dignity, sat upright in his chair, and proudly said, "It is Janet Watson, my wife." I recollected language at least new leader? He replied proudly, yes. That coincidence brought about three advantages for me. First, I met the scholar whose seminars, talks, and lectures I attended. And second, I arrived at a socio-cultural universal that not only myself, but husbands in general are confused by a surprise visit of their wives. And third, and most important, from that point onward, James became less formal and more friendly with me. I can't tell why, but I must say thanks to Janet. Prof. Watson, please feel comfortable and welcome. Your audience are keen to listen. The field is yours now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was a lovely introduction. I didn't remember that meeting, but I'm sure you're right. What I need to do is when I share screen, I need to share sound. Yeah. I will be doing this talk with Abdullah. He'll speak in Arabic. We can both respond to questions in Arabic or in Mahri if anyone wants to have a go. We'll see. So thank you very much for inviting us. We were absolutely delighted. It's the first time we've spoken to Iraq, isn't it, Abdullah, I think?
فعلا هي المرة الأولى ولنا الشرف صراحة أن نكون يعني معكم. لكم جزيل الشكر.
Yeah, thank you. Our research has been funded by the Leeds Hume Trust, the Arts and Humanities Research Council, and this is the symbol for the Centre for Endangered Languages, Cultures and Ecosystems.
جانيتو كفاك كاميرا لأن قري صحيح كاتب.
That's right. And so the outline is, this is something I've been thinking about for a while, that beauty, what is beauty? And that you can't say that one single thing is beautiful, is beauty, but that beauty lies in a natural diversity, across local language, culture and nature. So we look at this picture is beautiful, but what's beautiful about it isn't one thing, it isn't the colour. It isn't the colour of one part, it's the shadow, it's the shapes, it's the little waves, the undulations in the sand. And I want to see that in relation to language, culture and nature. So we'll look at the Far in southern Oman, we'll look at the languages of the Far, we'll ask what are the endangerment factors, what is it that is endangering these languages? Then we look at biodiversity, then linguistic and cultural richness of the area, because we're telling you it's rich, but we want to give you some facts about that. And then look at the relationship between language and nature. So when we look at the relationship between language, culture and nature, local indigenous languages reflect a close relationship between people and their natural environment. Because in order to describe that environment, in order to be able to work with that environment, we need to be able to talk about it. We need to have the vocabulary and the structures. Inhabited regions of the world which have the greatest biodiversity, by which we mean the largest number of species of fauna and flora, the largest topographical diversity, tend to have the greatest linguistic diversity. And that's interesting in itself. Since 1970, and this is a crucial date, there's been a 30% loss in biodiversity across the globe. Until recently, the focus has been on biodiversity, but recent studies have shown that the loss in linguistic diversity tracks or exceeds the loss in biodiversity. And that's important because without the knowledge expressed linguistically about various aspects of the ecosystem, we're not going to be able to revive these species. So endangered languages and cultures cluster in the same regions as endangered species, and linguistic knowledge is used to revive endangered species. And within Oman, we've got two really good examples. So the Arabian oryx and the Arabian leopard are undergoing revitalization programs at the moment. So Abdullah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أنا راح أكلمكم عن محافظة ظفار والمناطق المحيطة يعني بمحافظة ظفار. المنطقة صغيرة نسبيا، يعني محافظة ظفار هي منطقة صغيرة نسبيا، لكن التنوع البيئي يعني جدا مختلف عن المنطقة. عندنا يعني في محافظة ظفار أولا عندك السهول اللي هي الساحل، ثم سهل يعني الساحل اللي هو بجنب البحر، وحتى انه الشواطئ يعني في عندك شواطئ رملية بيضاء وعندك شواطئ صخرية، وايضا بعد الشاطئ عندك السهل او القربيب محليا يسمى، هي منطقة يعني مستوية بعد الساحل يعني. وبعد الساحل عندك الجبل او المنطقة الجبلية، وحتى عندنا في محافظة ظفار في المنطقة الجبلية عندنا موسم مطر يعني أمطار ولمدة 3 أشهر، يعني مختلف عن بقية المناطق. وعندنا على الجبل توجد هضبة، يعني مكان مستوي لكن هو مرتفع يكون على الجبل. وبعد الهضبة أو الهضاب الموجودة على الجبال عندك المناطق الشبه صحراوية أو مثل السيوح، يعني هي يسمى السيح بالمحلي. هذه المناطق يعني ممتدة ممكن 150 كيلو بعد الجبل ثم وأكثر من ذلك يعني. ثم عندنا الرمال والمناطق الرملية أو النجد أو الربع الخالي، أجزاء من الربع الخالي. وكل هذه المناطق يعني كل هذه التنوع الطبيعي موجود في منطقة جغرافية صغيرة نسبيا طبعا. وعندك وأيضا في ظفار عندنا مجموعة لغات متوزعة على اسمه ايش في ظفار.
أي yeah. We've got the UNESCO Atlas for the world's languages in danger lists 8 languages for Oman, of which 5 are in Dhofar. Mahri, which is definitely endangered, Shahrat severely endangered, Bathari is critically endangered, or Moribund. There are probably about 12 speakers of Bathari, and Hubyut is severely endangered. And then there's a really unusual dialect of Arabic called Bikthirit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it is we probably won't have time to talk about it, but if we do, there are some really interesting features about this. ممكن تتكلم عن وين يتكلموا هذه اللغات يا عبد الله؟
نعم. عندك أول شيء نتحدث عن اللغة البطحرية. البطحرية توجد في شرق ظفار، في الشويمية وشربثات وجزر تسمى كوريا موريا أو الحلانيات، كانت تسمى كوريا موريا. فهذه المنطقة اللي فقط اللي فيها اللغة البطحرية اللي هي أقل نسبة يعني في اللغات الموجودة عندنا. عندك اللغة ثم نذهب عند الهبيوت، هي موجودة بين على الشريط الحدودي بين محافظة ظفار اللي في سلطنة عمان ومحافظة المهرة في شرق اليمن. ثم الأكثر انتشارا من هاتين اللغتين يعني نسبيا الحرسوسية التي تقع في محافظة الوسطى في سلطنة عمان، وأيضا في يعني محافظة ظفار، بين الوسطى ومحافظة ظفار. وعندك ثم اللغة الشحرية أو القبلات الشحرية تسمى أكثر شيء، موجودة في مدينة صلالة وجبال ظفار، يعني لا تخرج إلى يعني خارج جبال ظفار. ثم اللغة المهرية، والتي طبعا أنا أتحدث اللغة المهرية لغتي الأم، موجودة في محافظة ظفار وكل تلك الأماكن التي توجد بها اللغات الأخرى، وأيضا موجودة في اليمن في محافظة المهرة، وتوجد أيضا في الخريطة لا تظهر ذلك لكن موجودة في أجزاء من الربع الخالي في المملكة العربية السعودية. وأيضا يوجد بعض الأشخاص يعني الذين انتقلوا إلى دولة الإمارات وهم يعني لا بأس، عدد لا بأس بهم من الناس يعني. وأيضا في دولة قطر يوجد يعني مجموعة لا بأس بها، وقالي أيضا في دولة الكويت وتنزانيا. طبعا هذه يعني ليس موطنها الأصلي بس موجودين هناك. شكرا جاني.
عفوا. وعبد الله أسلم من بومة.
أنا نعم أصلي من ربكوت، وهي قرية يعني صغيرة في النقد في خارج الجبل، يعني في السيح، يعني منطقة شبه صحراوية يعني. وأما الآن أسكن مدينة صلالة.
Okay, so what are the factors that are endangering these languages? Firstly, they are traditionally unwritten languages. Since I've known Abdullah, we write to each other text messages and then WhatsApp messages in more recent years using Arabic script, but in Mahri. So people do write in Mahri, but they are formally unwritten languages. And if you were to write a letter, you're going to write in Arabic rather than in Mahri. We've got the literary high prestige national language, Arabic, urbanization and education. So urbanization is really very recent. And it's meant that people are no longer living in the same places that they would traditionally have used their language in many cases. If you led a Bedouin life, or if you lived in the mountains and are now living down in the town, then a lot of what you do is not going to involve working with nature in the same way and working with the same semantic fields as it would have been in the days of your grandparents or when you were younger. Then we've got population movement, immigration and emigration, tourism and communication. Until Sultan Qaboos came to power in about 1970, I've read that there were about 1,000 kilometers of road, and that can be of paved road, and that can be put in context when you think that the distance by air between Muscat and Salalah is 1,000 kilometers. So we're not talking very much road at all. And then you've got the less prestigious modern South Arabian languages and cultures, losing out to the more prestigious Mehri and Shahrat and to Geneva Arabic. So there's been a lot of change. And because of this change, it means that people do not need to work with nature in the same way as they did. And what that means is that the younger generation are losing particular terms for different animals, different plants that were essential for life in the past. Different ways of collecting water. When water comes out of the wall rather than you having to go to fetch it, then there's a whole vocabulary around water fetching, water sourcing, that you're going to eventually lose. In terms of biodiversity, the Far and al-Mahri in eastern Yemen receive the monsoon rains. So they have, in contrast to northern Oman, they have 4 distinct seasons. Winter, which is from so December, January, February is going to be the winter period. Immediately followed by the hot period, okay, where the difference in temperature is really significant between one day and 2 or 3 days later. It's really quite extraordinary, that change. Then you've got the monsoon period. So June, July, August until early September. And then after that, you've got Arab, the post-monsoon period, which is often described as spring, Rabi'. Because of receiving the monsoon rains, there are flora species that you find in the Far and al-Mahri that you find nowhere else on the globe. So there are 78 types of flowers, types of plants that are found in Oman and nowhere else. And of these, the Far has the majority, so 57 species of plant are found in the Far and nowhere else in the world. We're not really talking about Socotra, but it's important to think about Socotra as well. Socotra is the 4th most biodiverse island on the planet. All of its land mollusks, so things that have got shells, snails, etc., 90% of its 30 reptile species and 33% of its 900 plant species are found nowhere else in the world. And at least 6 of its 181 bird species are also found nowhere else in the world. And there are also 11 different types of frankincense trees, and I'm not sure how many of those are endemic. But we're talking about a really diverse region. One of the things that we said earlier was that where you've got endangered languages, they tend to cluster in the same region as endangered species. And my colleagues, Andrew Spalton, Hadi al-Hikmani and Alec Moore have helped us with these slides. So Spalton Hikmani are working with the Arabian leopard. They say there are about between 44 and 58 adults. They've been tracking them as in southern Arabia. And where we find, so the red is the confirmed areas where you find the leopard, so parts of Saudi Arabia, northern Yemen, and Sahrat, the leopard is found in the same region that Sahrat is spoken, which is also severely endangered. Then we've got this smooth-toothed black-tip shark. There are lots of different types of shark that you will see in southern Arabia. This particular one is endangered, and it's been spotted here in the same region as Mahri is spoken, and here. And one of the areas where Mahri is spoken as a lugha jaliyah is in Kuwait. So that's quite interesting that we've got the shark in the two areas where you find Mahri. Let's have a look at linguistic and cultural richness. So we think that modern South Arabian, so Mahri and Sahrat and the other and the sister languages are probably the oldest extant Semitic languages. And there are 2 reasons why we think this. One is that they maintain 3 plain sibilants, so haruf al-Safir, that we know to have existed in ancient South Arabian. And one of these is a lateral. So we've got s, and sh. Abdullah, will ترتيق بهي اليوم؟
عندك حرف السين. سين يعني هن، ضمير المؤنث هن سين. شين يعني معنا.
حرف شي. أي.
وشي يعني شيء. شي.
شكرا.
عفوا.
And the second is that we get dual pronouns in the languages for all persons, including for the first person. So we know in standard Arabic you get anta and antumma and antum, and huwa and hum and humma. But in these languages you get dual pronoun for the first person as well. So I would say ho and ha, all of us, we, but okay, me and one other. And that goes throughout the system, including in the verbs. So we've got things like sierk, sierki, siro, sirito. And for the future participle, gihmona, gihmoni, gihmita, gihmoti. Abdullah, could you pronounce these words?
أكي. أكي يعني أكي وكلوكي كليتكي كلوكي سيرك سيركي سيرو سيرتو جهمونا جهموني جهميتا جهموتي.
Shukran, thank you.
When
we look at the number of sounds that we have in the languages, the number of consonants, I've put the Arabic consonants here, I've put the Mahri consonants here and Shahrat consonants here. You see that there are definitely more consonants in modern South Arabian than there are in Arabic. Abdullah, I'll play this because I haven't written these in Arabic script, but this is you.
Okay.
Okay. So we're going to play these sounds here. Sha, tla, ta, ba, cha, ba, ka, ha, ka. Okay. But in words.
شاء شيوط شاء شيوط شاء شيوط طا صيفت طا صيفت طا صيفت صا سمريت صا سمريت صا سمريت طا طاط طور طاء طاط طور طاء طاط طور جاء جنايف جليل جاء جنايف جليل فاء أضميت فاء أضميت ضاء أضميت كاء كايت قليت كا كاي قبلت كا كاي قبلت كا كاي قبلت.
So what you've heard here is sounds that phonemes that you don't have in Arabic at all. So sa and cha. And sounds that do have an Arabic cognate but have a different pronunciation. Sa, sa, fa, and ka, ka. Shahrat's got even more. We won't even go to Shahrat, but it has even more consonants. I think we can probably leave that one, Abdullah, unless we have time at the end. So we've got a richness in terms of the number of consonants. I was working with some colleagues this morning, and Shahara, we reckon, has 36 consonantal phonemes, which is quite a lot. Mahri has got less, but it's still got a lot. So we find lexical richness in areas of culture which are particularly important. And milk is of absolute vital importance in the culture, and it's still of vital importance, and that's really good. Whereas people may go out and buy chocolate where they wouldn't have bought chocolate in the past, but you're not going to go out and buy milk, and you're not going to go out and buy, I mean, you might buy some yogurt and stuff, but the importance of milk is absolutely central. And we have, this is a subset of the terms that we've collected for milk related terms. So khof, gate, taw, alu, hemkik, gabbas, ufok, morsel. I won't go through them all, and I'll probably start pronouncing them wrong if I do. But you'll see that apart from whey, curds, butter, milk, all the rest can only be translated into English using a pretty precise paraphrase. We just otherwise cannot do it. And things like the different terms for to milk with the whole hand, knut, to milk with the thumb in the palm, hashkur, to get lots of milk while milking. In terms of tansil, boys are brought up being able to recite their lineage, and it goes back an awful long way. I've got a recording of one here that we'll play for you. Some people, one of Abdullah's brothers, it's Suleiman, I think, is able to not only give his lineage, but also give the lineage of lots of other people. That's correct, isn't it?
فعلا صحيح.
That's just absolutely amazing. It's bad enough trying to do your own, but or rather difficult enough doing your own. But the fact that he and a few other people are able to recite other people's lineages it's amazing. Oh, and this is something we find elsewhere in the Arab world, so you're not going to be as surprised about it as people in the UK. But let me just play this one through for you.
سعيد برحمي بروبخيت برسيلم برسهي برامر برسيلم برسعيد برالي برتمي برشاقو برامرقي برسمودة بربوكي برحمي برقسوس برسريحي برسحسحي.
And I think one of the things that might be interesting is to collect more lineages and see the extent to which the further back you go, the terms are more Mahri-like. So things like Sharehi, Ashhashhay. So the lineage is patrilineal, but men are known by a matronymic. And women are known by a patronymic. So I'm known, my father's name was Peter, so I'm known as Bud Peter. But other people, men, will be known by a matronymic. So one of the families that I go to stay with is known as Ngema. Ngema is the name of the mother of, well, yeah, the grandmother of my friends who currently live in the house. Yeah, so we've got bit Ngema, bit Ruwaya, bit Baroque, where families and individuals are often known after a female ancestor. Right, language, culture and nature. So we've got the division of the colour palette is something that I've been interested in for a while. You've got these four basic colours. You've got ochre, which is basically the color of, I suppose it would be the color of blood. Hulwar, where you have no color, the darkness. Uborn would be general lightness. And then Hator is anything else. So all the colors that you see in that picture are Hator, but we're lacking a yellow. We've got a yellow there. And you would say, in order to say what sort of Hator you're talking about, you would say Hator, and he's Hatem. So Hator, like the sky, or Hator, Doma Hator, and he's Hill. That's Hator, like the sun. And Hator, and he's Marai. Hator, like the grass. But once you get to livestock colours, we've got the basic colours, and they're used for the livestock. And I've given them here in the feminine because you tend to talk about livestock, you tend to refer to a female animal as the basic. So Afarut would be red or bay, Hurut would be black, Ubanit white, and Hatlarit is sort of brown, often with a dorsal stripe. Then when you look at, we've got the additional colours. So Hazmayit is black for a camel. We've got Ubanit, Hatlarit, Samhmir. Abdullah, can he Samhmir Hamahasan he?
Samhmir?
Aha.
بركك أبي تولي أو بنيت وطه.
أها تولي وبنيت تولي وبنيت من حوروت أو تولي وبنيت من أفروت؟
من أفروت.
أها أوكي.
أبي.
I'm very sorry. Meleft, peppered, which is probably a relatively recent one. Judayit, bright white. Sahawil, fawn coloured. Hukak, a dark bright bay. Sahmir, dark brown. And then we have different colours for goats. We've got Afarut, Hurut, Ubanit. But we've got Turkat, spotted. So this lovely little goat is Turkat. Tabrik, piebald. Abdir, splodged, often described as a military jacket. Sahmit, pointed like with black points, like a Siamese cat. Habsit, grey. And then for cows, you've got different terms as well. Right, if we look at directions, time and measure, I found this interesting for a while, because when I taught it, I haven't taught Arabic as a foreign language at the University of Leeds. I've taught translation, but when I taught Arabic as a foreign language, one of the things that we taught was the cardinal direction. So you've got Gharb, Sharq, Shimal, Junub. And then when I was in Yemen, no one used Shimal and Junub. I thought that's quite interesting, really. So when I was in Sana'a, what I would have said was Shimal would be described as Qibli, towards the Qibla. What I would have described as Junub was Adani, towards Aden. And in the Far, the reference points depend on the direction of the floodwaters. They depend on the sea, on the mountains and the desert. So in some areas, people would refer to, if we were here, they would refer to this direction as Rawram, sea, and this direction as Nagd, because you're going towards the Nagd. But the direction of the floodwaters is really important, with upstream and downstream. So you can think that if you're, say you're on that, I can see mountains here, it's a bit easier to see the mountains here. If you're on these mountains, if you're talking about upstream and downstream, downstream on this side of the mountains is going to be towards the Nagd, but downstream, this side of the mountains is going to be towards the sea. So you've got very local directions, and that's important. And there's this lovely saying, فلان يغور بالحق من مصالة. So and so doesn't know upstream from downstream. Abdullah, what's going to take us to?
هذا المثل عندنا نحن، فيقال يعني فلان يغور بالحق منهم صالح، يعني لا يعرف كيف بالعربي جاني داون ستريم والاب ستريم.
الين يصير السيل، لا يعرف الين يصير السيل، او من اين يجي.
تقريبا مقرى السيل مع اعلى السيل من مهبط السيل، ممكن اقرب ذلك. هو وفعلا في ناس الحين فعلا، هو هذا المثل كان في القديم يعني للإنسان الغبي، يعني الذي لا يفكر، لأنه من المستحيل أنه الواحد لا يعرف مقرى السيل في وقتهم. أما الآن فعلا نحن نواجه هذه المشكلة، كثير من الناس يعني لا يعرفوا الحق منهم صح.
ايه صح، وحتى بعض الناس ممكن انهم يعرفوا المعنى.
صحيح، حتى بعض الناس ممكن إذا سألت بعض الشباب في وقتنا الحالي أسألهم معنى الحق، يقول شمال أو جنوب بحسب الحق مكانه هو اللي كان فيه يعني. تغير الوقت.
Yeah. And then time, this is something that we've been interested in for a while, that numbers, people can count, everyone can count. In Mahri you could count to 1,000 or however much you want to, that's perfectly okay. And in eastern Yemen that's not the case. People will count up to 10 in Mahri, and then they'll switch into Arabic numbers for 11 onwards. But for really important things, naming is used rather than numbers. And in terms of time of the day, we have all these different terms. Abdullah can read them out when I'll give the Arabic slide in a second. But one of the things I wanted to point out is the use of diminutives. So we've got Kasark, sunrise, and Thura Kautan, early sunrise. Thura Kautan is before the sunrise. Then we've got Ksobah in the morning, but we've got Subihan, early morning after sunrise, and the diminutive is before the Ksobah. The Leben, early mid-morning, is the diminutive of Thoban, late morning. So that's interesting. So it looks like the diminutives are being used at an earlier time in the day. But when we look at this side, after midday, we've got Ghasarayan, late afternoon is after Ghasarawan, late mid-afternoon. So the diminutive comes after. Kalaini is followed by its diminutives Kalaani, which suggests not that the diminutive comes before the non-diminutive, but it refers to a time when the sun is lower in the sky. So Surah Kautan, early sunrise, the sun is lower in the sky than it is in Kasark. Kala'ani, the sun is lower in the sky than it is for Kalaini. Take some, Abdullah.
طيب هذه عندنا ظروف الوقت في اللغة المهرية. فيقر يعني الفجر، فهق ذي يوم، بداية الشروق أو بداية ظهور ضوء الشمس. ثوريك أوتن يعني بعد ظهور يعني صباح الباكر. كالشرق أثناء الشروق، كالشرق الحيوم يعني أثناء شروق الشمس. بعد الشرق يعني بعد الشروق، صوابيحا أي الصباح الباكر، كصوبح في الصباح، دواليبا الصباح يعني ممكن من الساعة 10 وأنت رايح، الساعة 9 ممكن دواليبا، ذاوبا الساعة 11 ممكن 10 بذاوبا نهورا في النهار يعني من الساعة 10 إلى 11 إلى 12 كزبول يعني الساعة ممكن 2 1 12 كالعصر أي العصر، خصروا يعني بعد العصر صلاة العصر، ممكن خساري في نهاية العصر قبل شروق الشمس يعني، كلايني نهاية النهار، كلااني آخر نهاية النهار، كم جوزة أثناء الغروب، كجزة أثناء الغروب بالضبط يعني، كبصار يعني هذا في آخر نهايات الغروب يعني بعد أجزاء أو بعد الغروب. حاول ذاصر يعني بداية الليل، بحلي الليل يعني في الليل يعني نهديت ذاصر يعني بداية الربع الأول من الليل، فقح ذاصر منتصف الليل، تولي ذاصر نهاية يعني بعد الساعة 12 وانت رايح يعني منتصف الليل.
شكرا بالي سام.
عفوا.
And we find this not using numbers throughout the system. So livestock herd sizes, we've just given a few there. There are more, and I haven't updated the number. So we have different terms for different herd sizes, and women goat herders, if you start counting, if you say how many goats have you got and start counting, they'll get very cross. I have experienced that, not when I was counting, but someone else was. And then you've got all these dry measures as well, different dry measures. Yeah, so مقرئ أربعة قمو مكيو انتزقت هو. Nature, a metaphor, lots of metaphors around nature, but particularly in poetry, around wind, around shade and shelter. The wind that comes from the sea, indeed, is really praised. How does it go? يحيى بمدينوت بليك أريح الحيوب قليب السلام سعيد أكثر منك الصبوب. I've probably got it a bit wrong there. But the Mdeet could also be known as a Kos, gave a lot of relief from heat, and that's one of the reasons that it's praised so much. And some tribes will use the metaphor of wind, of a particular wind, to describe themselves. There's different poetry for children, poetry for adults, sung poetry while treating snakebite victims. And if you Google about snakebite victims in Southern Arabia, then you'll find videos of groups of people chanting over someone who has been bitten by a snake. If we have time, you could briefly talk about these different types of sung poetry, Abdullah.
هذه طبعا عندنا الفنون الغنائية في اللغة المهرية. عندنا يولا، يعني كل موضوع غنائي يعني له يعني مناسبة معينة. عندك فن اليولا، هو فن يعني صعب جدا جدا، لأنه كل كلمة من الشعر المهري بينه حروف، أو هذه الكلمة يو يلا يو يلا، ويعني في كلمة وحرف كلمة وحرف، فهي صعبة الفهم بقدر ما هي صعبة التطبيق. الداندون في الأعراس والمناسبات، عندك فن الداندون أو شعر الداندون، مجموعة كثيرة من الأشخاص يقومون بها يعني مع بعض. التغرود أو أيد عيوني، التغرود هو بالعربية أيضا التغرود يقام على الجمل الحماسة، يعني أثناء ركوب الجمال، أو أيد عيوني يعني لتحفيز الجمل على المشي وهكذا. سامعين أثناء المصائب أو أثناء الأعمال البطولية، أو أثناء يعني في قصة بطولية فيسرد بها الشعر ويغنى سامعين، يعني شيء بطولي. هودي وكريم كريم أيضا نفس الشيء للأشياء البطولية أو الأشياء المواقف الحزينة أو المواقف المؤثرة في المجتمع بشكل عام. هوبليت أثناء العمل، يعني أثناء مثلا تجميع السمك، العومة سمك صغير، أو العمل في الأسماك، أو أيضا العمل في أشجار اللبان، يغنون هوبليت، هوبلاني هوبال. يقال أن يعني كان المهرة يعني هذه الكلمة أتت من الإله القديم عند العرب اللي هو هبل، فربما لا زال إلى الآن يعني موجود هذه الكلمة، لكن لا يعرفون يعني معناها إلى الآن. الرابوت، هذا الفن يقام أثناء يعني عندما يلدغ إنسان، يعني يكون مثل الطقس كذا، طقوس معينة وكلمات معينة، وتجمع الأشخاص حول الملدوغ، ويوجد أهازيج يعني ربما تكون غير مفهومة في الرابوت أو الرعبوت. فسبحان الله، يقال أن يتم شفاؤه، يعني ما أعرف ليش، بس هكذا من لطغة السم. وش هذه متلتاش عنديمة؟
علي ولا علي؟
لي ولا لي؟ لا، لي ولا لي. هذه أيضا تقام في العمل، أثناء العمل، وأيضا يوجد ألو ولي، هذه للأطفال يعني تنويم الأطفال، وغيرها من الفنون.
أي شكرا.
عفوا.
And then you get grammaticalization, which reflects the relationship between people and the natural environment. So grammaticalization is where you take a word, a noun or a verb, and you make it into a particle, which can be used in a lot of different contexts. So we've got the noun shove, track or print. This is a photograph I took in a museum in Sharjah. I ought to get an up-to-date one. So we've got this word shove, track, which still retains that meaning, but it's also got the sense of it turns out to be. Could you read this, Abdullah?
كسك شف ضار مليت وكبا سف ضغيك وشفه شف التي.
Yeah. So we've got, I found a track on the sand, and I thought it was the track of a man, but that should be a step. But it turned out to be it turned out to be just the track of a woman. So you've got here the word Prof being used as the noun, and here as a particle, just turned out to be. So we've been involved in documenting the languages since 2010, really documenting Mahri, but we're also looking at documenting biocultural diversity. So it's not just the language, but also the culture and the ecosystem. And a lot of native speakers are involved in this documentation. Since the pandemic started in the UK, we had lockdown 23rd of March 2020. We've been running online workshops with academics, professionals, community members, very often with joint presentations between someone from the FAR or from al-Mahri or from Saudi Arabia and a young scholar from the West. YouTube and digital media plays a really big role in biocultural documentation. There must be thousands and thousands of YouTube videos of Mahri songs. And Abdullah and I have been developing a children's literature around nature. We did one recently around the role of a shadow. One of the phrases, one of the expressions that the Mahri have is, he's so forgetful he would lose his shadow. And we've done a little children's book around that, this little boy losing his shadow and losing various other things, and then having to go back and finding his shadow. And we could share the book, the PDF of the book with you if you'd be interested. So beauty lies in diversity across local languages, cultures and ecosystems, and it's been threatened in recent years, not just in our region, everywhere, globally. When I go cycling in Yorkshire, I see a lot of threats to the local beauty, local ecosystems, and the dialects, the language varieties. So this beauty is threatened by huge social and environmental change over a remarkably short period. Tribal and self-reliance, or tribal and group reliance, this huge sense of community, which there remains this really strong sense of community. But people don't have to totally rely on this now, because there's government reliance, there's funds that come from the government. And the break in the human nature relationship, loss of expertise. In the past, everything was made, fishing nets were made, fishing hooks, ropes, water skins for carrying water, baskets, mats, houses. Everything was made from natural materials, from local natural materials, and people collaborated in making them. Okay, yeah. Yeah. And so we've had a loss of environment because of climate change, because of social and political change, and then new materials. And yeah, so thank you very much. So thank you to all these people: Said al-Mahri, Ali al-Mahri, Abdullah, Miranda, Fabio, Alec, Andrew, Shahina, and Ahmed Karasi. Abali Yusamikum, Yusalamkum all.
Well, thank you very much, Prof. Watson, and thanks to Abdullah. Well done job. He's a good assist for you in this concern. It is a fascinating talk, showing the hard work, the field experience, and travel. I think Janet traveled a lot in Arabia. and acquired so much information and knowledge about that. And perhaps she lived with people, mixed with them, and ate their dishes. Perhaps she still remembers bit الصحن in Yemen and
ما شاء الله بنت الصحن.
Sultan
Yeah.
and Chufutan, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So I would like to allow some time for questions, if you don't mind.
That's fine. Abdullah has to go in a couple of minutes. So if there are any questions for
لا.
Abdullah, could you what?
عادي أردي كم كارت بيوردك كلا تعطي كسر كشيك.
Okay, talk. Yeah. Good. He'll still be with us, so that's good. Yeah. But I just want to say thank you very much for allowing us to move the time, because it would have been very difficult for Abdullah to attend if it had been later on. Hello?
Any questions, please? Well, since there is no question yet, I have a question. I have a simple question. This diversity, youth and diversity, seems to be violated here and there.
Yeah.
Is it humans who do that, or nature?
It's not just nature. I think it is definitely a sense in many nations that you want to feel like a nation. I think it's partly to do with the nation state. So if we say we're all Omanis, rather than saying we're all Mahra, everyone wants to belong to a group, and it's perhaps just that the group, it's a different type of group. So say in Britain, I might say I'm from Leeds, I belong to Yorkshire. But if I want to say I belong to the UK or I belong to England, then I'm looking at a much larger group. And I think it's this sense of belonging to a larger group which makes us try and ignore those things that make us stand out from other members of the group. But I mean, language, culture, climate change as well does have an effect. But then, what is causing climate change? And it's very often people that are causing climate change. So every single year in recent years, we've hit world records for temperature.
Thank you, Doctor. I think there is a question by Atiyaf. Please, Atiyaf.
Hello, Professor.
Hi, assalamu alaikum.
Hello, alaikum salam. I quite enjoyed this lecture. I found it interesting and fascinating. However, I'm intrigued by the change of language.
Yeah.
As we all know, people have always adapted to new changes, whether that happened in nature or languages, like we just talked about.
Yeah.
The evolution of words and nature is cultural as much as it's regional. Like small actions may lead to a whole new words and meaning being invented to adjust to the changes that are happening around us.
Yeah.
Language and nature can adapt over time and vary depending on the current circumstances and nature around the world. So like in 20 or 30 years, what do you think is going to happen to the English or Arabic language that we are speaking now where obviously it will change, but will the change be subtle or dramatic? Also, sorry, I would like to ask, as we have said, language changes over time with the contexts as well. What is your opinion about that? Like the use of poor language, is it like when people use like poor language, or like they don't use the proper standard English words or Arabic? Is it imperative for speakers and writers like to correct them?
It's a few questions that you've got rolled into one, haven't you? So yeah, language does change. Language adapts to changing circumstances, whether it's changing economic, social, or ecological circumstances. If a new product comes onto the market, or someone's worked out how to use a particular thing in a different way, then we're going to develop terminology for that.
Yes.
I think part of the problem is that with globalization, you're getting new things coming in, and the terms that are being used are global terms. So basically going back to English.
Yes.
Rather than adapting the language. Where you've got a language where the communities relied really strongly on their relationship with nature, being able to exploit in a really sustainable way the flora and fauna, and then they come to live in the town and they're no longer engaging with that ecosystem, then you're going to, over time, generations are going to lose terms. So yes, languages are always changing. There are always new terms that are going to come in, and terms which aren't used anymore, which are going to go out of the language. And I'm trying to think what your last question was.
It was about the standards of the language. Like, let's say an author, can he because you know, like English authors, they read and they know words, like proper hard words. They correct people. Is it right or wrong, like, to correct people and tell them, oh, what you're using is wrong, we use this word? But in our generation, we're always inventing new words and new terms.
If someone's pronouncing something, a particular word, and it isn't like the older generation would pronounce it, and the older generation may say, no, you should pronounce it like this. Or if they're not pronouncing a particular phoneme properly, then they may be corrected. But I don't think people should be corrected. Let me tell you a little story.
Yes.
And this is one of the reasons that I prefer to talk about language varieties rather than languages and dialects, because a dialect, what we call a dialect, could be just as endangered as another language.
Yes.
When I was brought up in Yorkshire, where I live now, and when I was 9, we moved near to London. And I had a really nice Yorkshire accent. And I was digging in our garden. We had this very, very long garden, which used to be a potato field. And I was digging away. And I said, oh, I've got all these taters in my hand. And the neighbour looked really shocked and said to my mother, oh, she does speak Yorkshire. And from that moment on, I haven't really spoken Yorkshire English. It was kicked out of me. And ever since, I've always felt it doesn't matter what language I speak. I've always felt that it's a foreign language. The English I speak now is not the English that I was brought up with.
Yes, because there's always like prejudice and underlying racism toward like different dialects, and depends where you come from the world.
Yeah.
Like in America, they prefer, like, if you speak, you know, like the proper standard English, like if you live in London, they like that. But in other dialects,
Yeah.
Make fun of it.
Yeah, I know.
Do you think
And I think everyone has the right to speak their language variety as they've been taught it.
yes, do you think we could do something like to, how do you say it, like to reduce or decrease the amount of prejudice and racism toward like different dialects?
I think that would be really good. In fact, I have a colleague who I'm working on at the moment, and Abdullah is working. So the group that Abdullah and I work with on the sound systems of Mahri and Shahrat.
Yes.
We have a phonetician who is working with us, who is wanting to do a project where she's looking at prejudice around the language in her region where she's from, in northern Spain, and prejudice in Arabia towards the languages and language varieties. So this is just an idea she's got, but she's encouraging diversity both in the classroom and in communities. And I think it'd be really interesting to have a look at this project and see whether we can make it a big project. Yes. To include more languages and more language varieties across the world.
Yes, but the thing that I took notice of is like whatever language you speak or where you are in the world, there is like a certain like type of dialect that if you speak it, or you're high class.
Yeah, exactly.
Dialect, you're high class, or if you speak like another dialect,
yeah,
you're low class.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's a problem that we need like to tackle and get rid of.
Absolutely.
Everywhere in the world, actually.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So is that the case in Iraq? Are there dialects?
Yes.
Where when someone speaks, you say they're upper class or they're lower class?
Yes, it's a problem. It's more of like about like the regions. Is like where I come from, Basrah, is like we have people who have like different dialects everywhere, and sometimes people like, oh look, he speaks this language, she speaks this dialect, sorry. So they probably didn't learn. They don't know how to speak and write. It's always, you know, like prejudiced against them people. Yeah. And it's actually really difficult for children at school. So when children go to school from Yorkshire, it's much more difficult for them to learn to read and write because the reading and writing system is geared towards people from the southeast. Yes. Around London. Yeah. Always don't say that word. You can't use that word. We don't. Yeah, exactly. And like the definite article in English, the or the, you don't get that in Yorkshire. You just get Hamza. Yes. So you get door. Yeah, problem that we need like to solve. Yeah. Thank you. I really enjoyed talking to you. Yeah, same here. Eye-opening experience.
Well, thank you, Abiyaf.
Thank you.
There is a question from Prof. Majid Abdul Hamid, Dean of the College of Arts, who's attending the talk with us.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum, Prof. Janet. Thank you so much for this interesting lecture.
Have fun.
Yeah. I have noticed that the most words you have mentioned begin with the consonants. Is this right?
In the talk.
Yeah. The first stress and the first letter, or like when we said she, not she, ye, not ye. Yeah, most of the examples you have mentioned just consonant without vowel.
So the initial awal harf is a consonant, yeah.
But the stress يعني شو يسمى الحروف الاحتكاكية يعني. تكثر في هذه اللغة؟
الحروف أيوة، الحروف الاحتكاكية تكثر كثير في هذه اللغة.
إيه. يعني ليست هوائية، يعني لا بالفم المفتوح واحد يستطيع أن يتكلم دائما، يعني فريكتيف أو
فريكتيف. ايه في هذه اللغات حروف احتكاكية كثير، لأن عندنا الثاء مش بس السين والشين، لكن الساء وشاء وثاء، وعندنا الشاء والجاء حرف احتكاكي مفخم لكن احتكاكي. وفي في اللغة الشهرية عندهم الثاء والثاء والساء والشاء وجاء وطلاء وثاء، حروف كثير احتكاكية.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Well, that Dr. Murtada has something to ask about.
Yeah, I'm here with you, but I can't see you. Hello.
Yes.
I don't seem to be able to connect with you.
We can see you.
نسمعك ونشوفك.
Oh, you can see me? That's it.
Yeah.
Janet, how are you?
Alhamdulillah. Murtada Bakr.
Haven't met you for so many times, so many years. But,
I know, أكثر من 10 سنوات أعتقد.
I missed the lecture because of some sort of misunderstanding in the time. I thought it was going to be at 8 o'clock.
Oh yeah, it's been recorded.
Yes. Anyway, glad to see you and to probably I don't know if you have covered this in your speech or not, but I was going to ask you a question about the naming that the modern South Arabian languages got.
Mm-hmm.
We got. I know the history of the naming of some of them. For example, Jubali. The name Jubali was invented by Johnston and so on and so forth. Probably Miranda Morris gave the name Bathari for the dialect. But what about the others? I mean, who gave these names? I know that some of them are already settled since antiquity, Mahri and Soqatri and Shharo, but some were given by some others, and this might have caused some sort of confusion as to how they are related. Harsusi and Bathari are, as you know, are actually variants of Mahri, right?
Well, this is one of the reasons that I talk about language varieties as opposed to languages and dialects, because a speaker of Mahri may say that Harsusi is a dialect of Mahri, mm-hmm. and that Bathari is a dialect of Mahri. Mm-hmm. But there are linguistic differences, and it's really it is I believe up to the language communities to call their language what they wish to call it. Abdullah, ممكن تتكلم عن هذا أسامي اللغات؟
فعلا نحن عندنا أولا بالنسبة لأسامي اللغات، هذه الأسامي يعني ما في جهة ثانية سمتها. مثلا اللغة المهرية هي سميت لأنها تنتسب لقبيلة مهرة.
بالتأكيد
اللغة الشحرية سميت بهذا
بالتأكيد.
الاسم لأنها تنتسب للشحرة أو أرض الشحر. البطحرية سميت بالنسبة للبطاحر
سقطرى
بس. لكن
بس البطحرية
أيضا
للقبيلة.
بالنسبة للهجات واللغات، يعني هي هذا الشيء هو تقريبا سياسي، يعني سياسي محلي. يعني مثلا عندك اللغة المهرية، أنا كمتحدث باللغة المهرية أعتبر أن اللغة، يعني معظم المتحدثين باللغة المهرية يعتبرون أن اللغة البطحرية واللغة الحرسوسية هي لغة لهجة من لهجات اللغة المهرية، لكن بطبيعة الحال هي تختلف، والمتحدثين بتلك اللغات يعتبرونها يعني لغة مختلفة عن اللغة المهرية، هي ليست لهجة. ومسمى اللغة واللهجة يعني أتوقع أنه الجهة الأكبر والأقوى أو المتحدثين الأكثر هم اللي يقرروا أنه هل هذه لغة أو لهجة، لكن في الأخير هي تعود للمتحدثين الأصليين بتلك اللغات. فيحق للبطاحرة مثلا أن يسموا كلامهم لغة، ولغيرهم يعني هذا حق مشروع لهم. هكذا أعتقد.
Really يسامحك يا عبد الله.
وهات سلايم بيرت بيتر.
Is that okay, Murtaza?
Well, Dr. Murtaza, be here. Janet is asking you. Hello.
Hello.
Well, it seems that Dr. Murtaza has perhaps a technical problem. I don't know. Yeah. Do you have any more questions, please? Well, it seems that there are no more questions, Janet. I would like to extend an invitation, an open invitation to you to visit Basrah, the University of Basrah, and you will see also some other places in Iraq. You will find beauty and diversity. Definitely.
I'm sure. Yeah. But, could Abdullah come too? يا عبد الله تحب نسير البصرة؟
والله شرف عظيم اني ازور العراق العظيم والبصرة والبلاد الجميلة العراق.
ممكن جدا يا عبد الله، ممكن في اي وقت، لكن الان ظروف الوباء البانديميك
بالضبط
الاشكالات، ف اعتبري دكتورة انه الدعوة مفتوحة، open invitation whenever you feel you can. Just contact us and we will arrange that.
That would be nice. One thing that we could do, we've done training workshops on documenting languages, dialects, and the language-nature relationship. So we could put on a few, if we were to come over, we could put on a few training workshops for students or for staff who were interested.
I think that would be great.
Because we'd have to, if we came, we'd have to have something to do. You'd have to put us to work.
Okay, that's great. At the end, I would like to thank you again, and thanks to Abdullah al-Mahri. Really, it was a pleasant time that we had tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. شكرا جزيلا للكل.
أشكركم يعني جزيل الشكر على الاستضافة الطيبة، واستمتعنا جدا يعني بهذا اللقاء، وأشكركم مرة أخرى. شكرا.
شكرا
شكرا
جزيلا.
لكم يا عبد الله، وإن شاء الله أوقاتكم سعيدة. شكرا جزيلا.
إن شاء الله. شكرا جزيلا. شكرا عبد الله.
شكرا جانيت وشوادش.
شودك.
شوادش.
Oh, Fel, the recording. You're recording, aren't you? Are you going to send the link?
Okay, no problem.
Yeah, that would be good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. شكرا. شكرا.
Thank you very much. Thank you. شكرا جمهورنا الكريم، حضروا المحاضرة واستفادوا بالتأكيد من ما طرحت جانت. كان ممتع جدا ومفيد. شكرا جزيلا.
شكرا، وإن شاء الله نلتقي بعد الوباء.
إن شاء الله. إن شاء الله.
مع السلامة.
مع السلامة. شكرا جزيلا.